Hello, everyone. Welcome to our channel, Scientology, Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm here with my co-host, Janis Gillham
Janis,
Grady.
Gillham, Grady. G'day, everyone.
How you doing,
Aloha,
Janis?
Mark. I'm good.
Aloha, aloha, aloha. We've got another great interview here going on. Part two. It's a nice day, and the last one we did with our guest. Why don't you go ahead and introduce him?
Yeah, we have Nan McLean back with us. We had a great fun in our last interview with him talking about ship days, the coup in Morocco, and him meeting Hubbard, and that type of thing. And we're ready to roll with the next chapter of his life. So let's welcome John.
Thank you very much.
Hi, John. How you doing?
I'm good, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you both.
Hey, John.
Yeah,
nice to have you back.
Thank you.
So I was going to say, John, your interview was very well received with the comments and stuff that everybody said on there, and they said you're a good storyteller, which you are, and we're really happy to have you back here. And just to reacquaint everybody here, basically we talked about your time getting into Scientology, and then your life on the flagship Apollo, meeting L. Ron Hubbard. And then eventually you leaving, and the Moroccan coup, we talked about that too. And that's kind of where we left off, is you leaving the Apollo, sort of disillusioned with what was going on. So we thought we'd pick it up there, if you would. What happened when you left the ship? I mean, where did you go, and how did that all come about?
Well, I left the ship on November the 9th, 1972. I think as before, when I was trying to get off, you have to pass a security check, of course. And I failed the security check because supposedly I had unkind thoughts about L. Ron Hubbard. Well, I actually did.
Oh, okay.
But I had to get over it in order to get off the ship, because our passports were locked up. We talked about us being prisoners on the ship, basically. And so I had to basically get a floating needle on the e-meter in order to pass the security check, which, again, if you really relax and allow your mind to just be at peace, you can fool the e-meter and or pass a security check, which a lot of people still in Scientology may not know that, but certainly those of us that are out. And Janis, I know you have written that in your 3 books, which absolutely fantastic books, really. The best insight into the early days of Scientology that you'll ever get. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Let me just correct that. There's only 2 that have completed and issued. The 3rd book I'm still in the middle of.
Well, I've read some excerpts, I believe, then. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you have. Yes, you have.
Here's book 1, and here's book 2, and they're both available in our merchandise store. If you're interested, you can go ahead and click on the link below, and you can get autographed copies, and they're really detailed. They have photographs, and so anybody who's interested in that, you can get them at our merchandise stores. Go ahead, John.
Great. Thanks, Mark. So quickly to recap, I left the ship ostensibly to handle a situation that was going on at the Toronto organization with my family. Nan, my mother, famous lady in early days of Scientology, and God love her, she was a fighter. There she is. And she fought up until a week before she passed away in November of 2019 at the age of 96.
Wow.
She had a good run. Good run.
And she was involved with many other people trying to help other people get out of Scientology as well, which we may get into later. But to quickly recap, I got out, and I wanted out desperately after I was involved in selecting the auditors that resulted in the death of 13 Moroccan military individuals who I had picked the auditors for because they spoke French. I had to interview them as third mate on the ship. Janis, you'll remember, we went up and met with Hubbard, and we were told what to do. And long and the short of it was I felt very badly about it because I really did know that the e-meter could or might not be correct in finding quote unquote traitors. But they tried to trick us, they being the King's sister and those individuals at the time. They put a plant in among the first 3 that were being sec checked. And
Right.
the long and the short of it was that the auditors found that individual, identified him, and he was again arrested. He'd already been arrested and in prison, so they knew he was one of the guys that was the bad guy. But the other 2, they correctly identified as having nothing to do with it. So again, they embraced Hubbard, the auditors, and the cover name OTC Limited, Church of Scientology, aka, and I felt so uncomfortable. And back home, parents were in a lot of issues with Church of Scientology of Toronto, had filed knowledge reports. I had brought them back from leave in April, I believe, of 1972. I arrived back, and actually I was promoted to 3rd mate, responsible for the personnel, the communications, and discipline within the organization. And that's one of the reasons I was the one that had to pick the auditors that spoke French. Again,
Now, John, I have a question. John, I have a question. How come you didn't end up on the team? You speak French.
Because I wasn't an auditor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so they didn't try to get you trained quickly or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I think I would have refused anyway, even if I had been trained in that respect. Although that would have been a really bad situation as far as Hubbard was concerned. You refuse me, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you're right.
Chain locker or wherever. Yeah. So anyway, I came back ostensibly to handle my family's situation at the Church of Scientology of Toronto. And they had a lot of legitimate complaints. Janis, you'll remember that the Toronto organization was regarded as being one of the best around the world at the time.
Yes.
Very upstat. Great reporting to Flag, to Hubbard. But my mother blew the whistle and said a lot of those statistics were false. And that was part of the information I brought back to the ship, and that their auditing hours and their successes were highly exaggerated. So I came back, I got filled in by a whole year of what my family had been through with harassment, and decided, I will not go back. That was before I saw in the newspaper on January the 13th of 73 that 13 officers had been executed as a result of the security check. So with that going on, harassment had already started against the family, because the exec said, the Toronto organization, Brian Lebman, Emil Gilbert, they were really ticked off with what was happening because they were being ratted on. And
so Brian was not yet the assistant guardian. He was one of the executives with Emil.
Actually, Brian was AG.
Okay.
Yeah. Emil was the ED.
Right.
Okay. So, and Emil wasn't the nicest person in the world either at the time. With that said, so we're getting into the falsifying stats, which I won't deal with at this point. So immediately, as I said, harassment started. Phone calls to the residents in our area were made alleging embezzlement, the usual high crimes that Scientology points out, apparently, Mark, even now.
Yeah, John, I was just going to ask you, can you orient us, where were you at then? Was this in Toronto?
Yes.
I was living in Sutton, Ontario, which is 50 miles due north of Toronto.
Okay, were you living with your mother, or were you just in close
Mom and Dad,
contact?
yes.
Or
No,
yeah,
I was living at home, my original
okay,
home. And we found out later that we were actually followed right from the airport when I came back to home
Oh,
by C of S Toronto spies. And they never left us for a long period of time. Wherever we went, whatever we did, we were being followed. And
so
was it?
Brian had to have set that up as the assistant guardian.
he did set it up as AG.
Okay.
So your mother had not spoken out against Scientology at this point, other than just writing knowledge reports to management in Hubbard, correct?
That is correct.
But the
Mom,
Guardian's office obviously found out about it, and so they were taking action, which is ridiculous, with the spying and everything.
Well,
Yeah.
Hubbard would have mentioned it to Mary Sue, and Mary Sue would have put something down her lines down to Brian for Brian to even be getting involved in it, because they would have considered it a danger to the organization.
because remember, I was one of the people that blew the whistle on the ship and the business with the Moroccan king, Hassan II, etc., went up through Interpol, which resulted, I think, Janis, in you guys scooting out of Morocco pretty quickly.
Well, what got us scooting out of there was in December, around December the 5th or something, there was a phone call from Rabat where the missionaries were. And the phone call was, I believe it was Peter Warren. And I remember I was in the Villa Laurie in Tangier, and the phone rang, and I looked at Hubbard. I'm like, who's calling here? This phone never rings. So I answered it, and it was Peter Warren in Rabat who wanted to talk to the Commodore right away. So I gave the phone to him, and that's when they said that they'd shown the list of the people involved in the coup, and it had been given to one of the people on the list. So, so it was like, oh yeah, it's like, oh my God, yeah, it's like, oh, this guy's name's on the list. All right, well, who else? All right, let's give it to him so that he can give it to the king. And so that is what blew up in our face. And that's when Hubbard, while he was on the phone, turns to me and says, have Andre pack my bags. So I got Andre Tabayoyan, and he packed up LRH's bags, and Mary Sue said goodbye, and Andre and LRH drove down to Casablanca for LRH to catch the next flight to Lisbon. And we stayed in Tangiers an extra week and packed everything up and shredded things and burnt things and just kind of cleaned ship in order to not be involved. And then we took a ferry across.
Where was the Apollo at the time?
The Apollo was in Lisbon. It had been in dry dock.
Oh,
and
you guys
LRH and the messengers and the household unit and the aides, we were still in Tangier waiting for the ship to get finished. And so we went there in September, and then in December was when we left. And when we got back to Lisbon, LRH had already left and gone to New York with Jim Dinkowski and Paul Preston.
Oh. Now, John, I have a question for you. How did the Interpol find out about this? Had you spoken to them, or what happened?
Well, yes, I ended up speaking with them through the RCMP of Canada. So
explain what happened. You know, that we didn't go over that as part of the story.
No.
So you went to the RCMP, as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Is that right?
That is correct. So when the harassment started, we didn't intend on doing that right away or even at all until we started getting harassed directly by Toronto organization and what we thought was directly from the Guardian's office, Mary Sue. So when we started being harassed, we got very frightened, of course, because of the ramifications of the information that some of us had, myself included. And so we went to our local police and said, this is what's happened with our family. We have started to be harassed. We expect more to happen here. And we have some important information that we think from an international standpoint should be known. And that is that Hubbard had a plan to take over some countries. February 20th, 1971, the Ouds. That was just on Tony Ortega's site a couple of days ago.
Right.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Now I have a question for you. What was the harassment? Just the spying or the phone calls? I mean, this is 1972, right? Is that
late 72 it started, yes.
right? So there was no internet or anything like that, but they were basically, you were having weird things happen around you, I guess, right?
They were following us. They were making phone calls to the neighbors. We were in a very small town of 10,000 people. So everybody knew everybody.
Right.
Our neighbors across the street received phone calls about, Eric McLean's an embezzler. John McLean is a child molester and a thief, and a number of other things like that. And we ended up getting, I think, 5 different letters of confirmation from neighbors that we knew who were willing to go on the record and say, yeah, this is what I received. And, I think it's horrible. And so we were lucky enough to be able to get that from them to give some veracity to what we were saying to the police.
Right.
So this
John,
this pushed you guys into speaking out.
Oh, it did.
The false stats and the harassment.
Yes. We would not have gone public if we hadn't been started to be harassed.
So when you got back to Toronto, you were sending up reports, and then it wasn't handling. So that's when you went to the police.
Yes. Although I'm not sure the timing between whether Hubbard had an opportunity to digest those reports or not.
Hubbard left the ship, remember, in September.
Yes.
So he wouldn't have been getting any of those reports after that, because the ship was in sailing and was Casablanca, and then later it came back briefly, but he wasn't on management lines because we were living in Tangier, and then the ship sailed over to Lisbon, and so he would have been totally off all the management lines at that point, and Mary Sue would have been the one running the show.
Which makes sense. That's why the Guardian's office started attacking.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, I get you. So, well, with that said, obviously Hubbard wasn't directly involved initially, but he certainly knew after the fact.
Oh yeah, yes. No. We're not trying to make less of what he knew. We're just trying to understand what the sequence was here. And so then Janis, like you said, when he got this call from Peter Warren, that's when he hightailed it out of Morocco, and you guys ended up leaving.
Right, exactly.
Got it. Okay.
And for years afterwards, I know he knew about the problem with Nan, because I kept hearing about it. He would bring it up, and we'll get into that later when we find out what Nan was doing.
Yeah, if you Google Nan McLean, you'll see a great long list of what she did, her accomplishments, and how she did her best to bring the truth out. And hats off to her for that.
Okay, so let me ask you another question here then. Okay, so you guys had been Scientologists, your mother and your family and you, right?
Yes.
And this Moroccan thing happened to you. The false statistics and the different things going on at the Toronto organization upset your mother, right?
Yes.
So at what point did you guys go like, this is a bunch of crock, you know what, and this is ridiculous, and we need to start doing something about it? What was do you remember the make break point on that, or what happened?
Yes, when I came back, and I then saw not only the letters they'd already written, which I had taken to Hubbard directly, but also a number of other letters that they had written after that fact that I had no knowledge of. And it was just the same crap that, they weren't being listened to. They were being harassed. And the letters to LRH said, we're being harassed here. Emil Gilbert wrote something to my mom that basically said, it was on the 17th of July of 71, she was being told to be a guarantor for people who wanted to borrow money to pay for Scientology courses. And Mum was one of the few working, quote unquote, people that were in the organization at that point in time, and had access to some funds. So he instructed her to guarantee to banks that she would pay for people who wanted to borrow money. And basically, he said, just do as I've said, being a guarantor, or resign at once, resign and blow, and you'll be declared a baboon. A baboon from Emil, and a category which you totally deserve, he said. And then he signed it, thank you, egghead, love, Emil.
Wow.
Like, this is the executive director of the Church of Scientology, basically
Yeah.
furthering the harassment to Mum.
I get it.
Yeah, and she, she believed still at that point. Mark, you asked, when did we change as far as our attitude overall? That was, again, when we started discussing all of the letters that went to Hubbard and all of the letters that came back, because he did respond, or Ken on his behalf did respond, or Mary Sue, I'm not sure who, but certainly it was Ken signing the letters, love, Ron.
Yes.
So we were disappointed, and very disillusioned. Right. And then on the January 13th news, when we read in the Globe and Mail, major newspaper in Canada at the time, that 13 officers had been executed, we put two and two together, and I thought, oh my God, how, I have to get out of here. This is insane. And that was just added on top of all the other harassment that was starting. So, naturally, Toronto was pissed off with Mum about telling the truth about Toronto Ward, who Hubbard believed was one of the best, I think, at the time, certainly in North America. So anyway, here we go, where harassment is happening. We had evidence, and did find it in the raid that occurred in Toronto, concurrent with the raids in, I believe it was New York, in 75, 76, somewhere in there.
You're talking about the FBI raids?
Yes.
That was July 77.
77, okay.
In D.C. and L.A.
Yes, DC.
Yeah, though you were able to confirm a bunch of the stuff. I was telling John that I read a news article from 1980 where basically that raid by the FBI found all sorts of documentation confirming the harassment that was done against John and his family. Yeah.
That raid confirmed so much for so many people.
It did, and it was gratifying to those of us who were saying, my God, we've been harassed. This has been done to us. And here, Scientology stupidly, and I don't know whether it still happens, write everything down that they do. And everything that was planned in any kind of harassment or mission against people was written down. And
absolutely. No, absolutely. John, you make an excellent point. I've made this before myself, that, a lot of files have recently come out from 2006 and 7 that Mike Rinder had when he left and all that. And we were given our files last summer, and we went through them, and it just confirmed the harassment that was done against us just in that time period. It doesn't even cover what happened before then. Do you know what I mean? And I said, at the time, I said, it would have been great if the FBI in 2009, when they were investigating, if they had gone in and raided the hole. This is on a totally different subject. Gillham Hot Springs, the hole where all these people were locked up. Because even if the people said, oh, no, we're happy to be here, they would have gathered up so many documents, because Scientology keeps everything in a file.
Yeah, they do.
So they would have found so much evidence of abuse and crimes that, it would have made a major dent in that organization at that time going forward. Anyway, go ahead.
Let me just bring out something stupid that they did after those raids. And that is where they had they had sent out projects to vet everything, to show that Hubbard wasn't on the lines. And so if Hubbard had written an advice and it was signed R, people were exacto blading the little R out.
I remember that. Yeah, that was still going on even like up through 1980 or whatever. It was stupid.
Yeah.
It was like, because they had the Xerox paper was really poor quality. It was like, like filmy, and you take like a little X-Acto knife, like you said, and take out anything that said R. Like they couldn't figure out that R was L or H. You know what I mean? It's just
a little letter cut out.
Well, that's interesting. During this time period with the raid, and after we had done a few television shows, which we were sued for automatically. See, we never lied about Scientology, told the truth all the time, so they could not catch us in a lie or exaggeration. And every bit of the media that we talked to, and we did probably half a dozen television shows on CBC and CTV, and another half a dozen major articles in things like St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Tampa Bay, Clearwater,
St. Petersburg Times, Clearwater Sun.
Those two. So again, they couldn't sue us because we said, we're not going to talk to you unless you defend us. So we never lost a case, and we were sued a total of about 15 times.
Wow. Yeah, we're going to get to that in a minute, but no, I mean, just to back up what you just said, that's why they don't come after the people that are the SPTV creators and the channels, because the people are telling their stories of what happened to them. They're not making this stuff up. Who makes up stuff like that? Do you know what I mean? They're telling the truth. So how are you going to challenge that if you're Scientology coming back after them saying, oh, no, this never happened? Yeah, no, there's plenty of witnesses to things that happen that can confirm things. So anyway, that's a whole nother subject. But anyway.
But again, they're all part of the seized documents, right?
Yeah.
So within those seized documents that were found in Toronto, we had some direct physical harassment from the Church of Scientology, not the least of which they were trying to intimidate us with a funeral that they held in our hometown, carrying a black coffin headed by Brian Levman, and handed out pamphlets for a funeral for lost souls.
Is this these photographs here?
Yes. Yeah, that's one of them. There's Brian here, second person in the line there. And there's also one in front of our bank that they also went into and tried to say, these guys are criminals. Yeah, there it is. And you shouldn't be dealing with them, etc. I mean, in a small town like that, you get this kind of crap going on. And it's like, oh my God, this is scary stuff. This is a veiled threat. Then next picture was, they went to my father's place of work at the Board of Education of the region, York Region District School Board, and tried to paint him as being the worst person in the world and stealing from everyone, etc. So,
and this is in the 1970s, early 70s, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
No, they carried on doing that for years. I mean, today they do the similar thing, but now they do it on the internet. They don't have to do a protest out front. They just do a hate website and then just, send out anonymous emails and stuff to people you work with and people you work for. It's just the same playbook over and over again.
But weren't you both people followed and had private detectives trying to dig into your background and try and dig up dirt? Because that's one of their policies,
Yep.
Yeah, and not only that, pose as our friends. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You know, people hired that basically got hired at the company we worked at, that lived in the same apartment complex, that we played racquetball with, that we talked to and went to dinner with. Absolutely. You
Would
know,
go
and this was all
camping
found out
with.
later. Yeah. Yeah. And they were just, we weren't, all we were doing was making money and trying to get on with our lives. We weren't even speaking out. You know,
Right.
just Miscavige just wanted to know what the hell were we up to, you know?
Yeah. Well, again, that would have all been documented. But, you know,
Yeah.
one of the more scary things that physically they did to one of the family's vehicles, my brother's car, they loosened all of the wheel nuts on the
Ooh.
passenger side of the car. He went out and started driving down the road, and the wheel came off. Had he been going any faster, you know, he could have had some serious issues.
Yeah.
They're even doing that stuff right now where they're, you know, these people that are auditing and protesting in front of some of the Scientology organizations in LA and in Clearwater, they're pounding nails in their tires. Do you know what I mean? It's the same thing. You know, so you could be driving down the road and get a flat tire on the freeway and have an accident, you know?
It's dangerous. Very
Yeah,
dangerous.
Lisa Plays has shown that, you know, her car in Clearwater, you know, with nails in the tire, you know?
Wow. I mean, that's scary stuff and
Yeah.
Yeah.
physically dangerous as hell. I mean, but they're still doing it. That's what I can't believe, that they're still doing it after so many years of documentation of exactly what they do and how they do it. And all they're doing is replicating it.
No, and the reason is, as you well know, keeping Scientology working. L. Ron Hubbard knows what he's doing. We are going to do what he said to do back in 1968 and 70, and we never change. And that's what happens. They just
That's
change
right.
a little bit the tactics. They change a little bit how they do it, but they do the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I began to think that we had old, and we do have, as a family, had old information. I mean, it's early 70s. Come on. It's not relevant anymore, but it is. That's what's crazy.
So let's get back to where, you know, like, obviously you guys spoke out more, and then, you know, tell about, they obviously came after you legally. I mean, go ahead and tell the story, because I don't know it at all, other than just I remember the name Nan McLean.
Okay, well, we did a number of television shows, at W5, which I believe, Janis, you watched that one.
Yep.
Which, you know, Mom at that point was still very hooked with believing that Scientology can make a difference. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, here's all of us around her, my sister the most, said, "This is crazy. You know, can't you admit that you were taken?" And it wasn't until the end of the show where Mom said, "Yes, damn it, I was taken." And from that point on, she made it her mantra to do everything she could to point out to anybody and everybody the problems with Scientology. She went and counseled individuals who wanted to get out, whose family wanted them to get out. She ended up entangled at one point with Ted Patrick, who kidnapped people, or allegedly kidnapped people. Excuse me, Mr.
Yeah, he was a deprogrammer. That's what he was
Yes.
called back in the day.
And that's basically what Mom was, but she did it gently. She did it with all of the niceties that she possibly could, working for the people that, you know, wanted to get their children out. Basically, most of it was children she dealt with, but she did it dozens of times and never asked for a penny. Never. And, you know, that was her difference with other people, that, okay,
Yeah.
I'll do it, but I want some money. You know, Mom
Do you
did
remember when you obviously were declared suppressive people by Scientology at some point, right?
Yes. That was November 1972.
Okay, not long
Oh,
after
when you
left.
left.
Yes. My folks had already been declared, and
Oh, okay.
and then Brian, who already had the information that I was on the way home from his people on the ship, that I was then declared.
Okay.
That's the scarlet letter in Scientology
Yeah.
for viewers
Yeah.
that don't know. That means you are a criminal and not to be trusted in any way, shape, or form,
Well, it's
basically. But you're
declared
not. I
And
mean,
that you can
in
be,
Scientology's view, anyway.
you can
a
be,
suppressive person.
Right.
and as a suppressive person, you can be tricked, lied to, or destroyed.
Utterly destroyed. Yeah.
Utterly
Exactly.
destroyed. So, and again, time and time again, that's what they try and do. They try and beat you into the ground until you give up and you say, I'm done. I can't handle this.
I bet you're glad that you got away from the ship at that time, knowing now what you know now, right?
Yes, and
You could have been stuck on the ship and not gotten off, and not knowing what was going on.
And there would have been no way for me to get off because my passport's locked up with everybody else's. So if I hadn't had that lovely floating needle, then I wouldn't have gotten off. And I was stopped the first 2 times that occurred. So
Okay,
anyway.
so basically, you guys did you guys ever sue Scientology, or did they sue you, or how did that?
No, we ended up suing them as well. Finally, after being sued, well, we were sued a total of 15 times. We did sue them, and we went through all the way up to a quasi-jury trial that was basically supposed to be showing us what the result was going to be if this went to trial. So a specific amount of money was identified at that process or during that process that we should be awarded, my mother and myself, as a result of all the things they had done. And we weren't disappointed per se, but we ended up settling because the judge told us, these guys, she told us in front of them in court, these guys are going to drag this along for another 10 years. Do you think that you can put up with this? So she asked for a recess, and Mom and I went back and just said, okay, we will accept a certain amount, which we did. And that was, I think, only the second time that they had paid out any money to anybody.
When was this? What year was this?
The payment was made in 1985.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
that was years later.
That was
many
after
years later. I mean, that's
Wallersheim and the Christofferson case. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And poor Jerry Armstrong got the short end of the stick on that one. Because he should have been able to win his case, but didn't happen.
Sorry.
So yeah, I mean, at that point in time, we are still worried. One of the times we were going down, actually, we were asked to come down by Bob Snyder, who did a Clearwater
radio station.
Right.
Yeah.
That's Let's Tell the Truth about who's actually coming into Clearwater, because when they came into Clearwater, it was again another cover organization. I think it was
a lie. Southern Land Development,
right?
And then we were the United Churches.
Yes. So he found out about our TV show and asked us to come down and tell it like it was. And Gabe Cazares, the mayor, wonderful man, asked us to participate in the community forum. So we did. And
what was that? Is this where the hearings in Clearwater?
It was prior to the hearings in Clearwater. Actually, it was just a community meeting in order to tell the public what was really happening, because the church hadn't actually taken over everything at that point in time in downtown Clearwater. So we were trying to warn them that, hey, this is what's happening. Here's what happened here. Here's what was happening in Morocco. They want a sphere of influence where they take over that community. And that's clearly what they were doing in Clearwater. So all the Scientologists came to this public meeting, of course, and were in the audience ridiculing myself on stage. And Jerry Armstrong came up to the edge of the stage, pointing his finger at me and saying, "You're just lucky, John." And later I found
This is before he left, right? He still was in the Sea Org.
Oh, yeah. Right. And, you know, I totally forgive him, etc. I mean, he was a friend, and I would regard him still as a friend. He was a good friend of Mom's. They talked all the time.
So they had used Jerry to do that because he knew how close he was to the family?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he whispered, "I've got a gun." And later I found out that if he had been told to, he said he would have shot me right then and there. And because, again, you're so brainwashed to believe that what you're doing is the right thing. And that's really brainwashed, but
yeah.
So anyway, there was Jerry, and you know, we confronted each other, and you know, the Scientology always said that Mom and I wouldn't confront in a discussion with Scientology. We never said we wouldn't, and we always said, yes, let's go for it here. We've got the goods on you. Let me jump back a bit, though, because during the time period that the FBI did the taking of the documents, Mom and Paulette Cooper became the dearest of friends. Paulette came to our house many times. Mom and Paulette talked on the phone every night because Paulette was just so in a state where she needed somebody to help.
Right.
And
Paulette Cooper, just for our viewers who don't know, Paulette Cooper was a journalist in the late 1960s and early 70s who wrote a book, who got involved with Scientology to find out about it, and then wrote a book called, I think it was The Scandal of Scientology, and then became public enemy number one. Public enemy number one for years, and the dirty tricks that were done to her were horrendous, and they've been also covered in Tony Ortega's book about the was it The Unbelievable Miss Lovely, or anyway,
yes.
He wrote a whole book with Paulette, and it's an amazing story about what the Guardian's Office and Scientology did to her, and of course they did the same thing, obviously, or similar things to your family and your mother Nan.
Nothing as bad as what happened to Paulette.
I mean, no, hers was really bad. They tried to get her put in prison, into mental institution, commit suicide. They planted a letter to get her the fingerprints and got her indicted for making a bomb threat that she never made. I mean, they did some really dastardly things.
It was horrible. Yeah. She became a great friend of ours, and specifically of Mom's, and they loved each other. She came to my wedding, which was great to see her there. But again, they depended on each other a lot because they had the same interests. And again, Paulette wrote a letter to the family after Mom passed away saying, you know, I totally regret the fact that we didn't continue the same kind of relationship we had later on, because Mom ended up being 96. Paulette's still a young lady.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a great time, and that's when all of the information was really coming out. And both Paulette and Mom worked on the files in DC, and they're the ones that made all of the copies of the Snow White program and all of that when they were available to the public. And bang, they held on to them. And that's when the world blew up on Scientology as it relates to some of the programs they were doing, especially Snow White. And,
right.
You know, and all of Paulette's stuff was there, like saying, okay, we're going to do this and this and this to her. And it really helped her find that and realize that, you know, she really wasn't nuts. And we felt the same way when.
Right. No, I know the feeling. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. What, now talk about, you guys went down, you mentioned it earlier that you went and testified at an IRS hearing. See, one of the things I want our viewers to know, Janis and I were in the Sea organization. We would know nothing about this because we were totally involved in our quote unquote ivory tower, not reading the newspaper, not following the news, in Clearwater or on the ship or up at the Gold Bay. So we didn't know any of this stuff, and it was all kept away from us. So you mentioned this IRS hearing. I had never heard of this until you just mentioned it. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so we were asked to come to the IRS hearing because one of the jobs that I had, external comm and external transport, was I was going back and forth to Madrid, bringing money back and forth from the ship. And I think, Janis, didn't you report in your book that at one point when you were dissolving the Morocco stuff, there was $7 million transferred from the ship to Swiss bank accounts? Am I?
There was some millions that were put into the safe in LRH's cabin.
Gotcha.
And Kimma and Tony and even my brother had done courier runs from Luxembourg to bring cash to the ship.
Yeah.
And Zurich. Yeah.
So that's one of the things I did. The money was transferred from Luxembourg or Switzerland through Foster Tompkins in Madrid, and then I would bring it from there to the ship. So, there were a couple of times that I think there was over $1 million in negotiables, wow. Some of which was, not a lot was cash that I ever saw, but there was cash.
Yeah, I carried cash one time returning from a leave of absence. So from Los Angeles to Lisbon, I carried cash. I think it was around $70,000,
Yeah.
A lot of money.
Isn't that illegal?
Each stop.
Illegal? I mean, I know now
illegal.
You can't carry more than $10,000.
No, you can't.
If you're out of the country without declaring, you have to declare if you have that more than that money. So, Janis,
but Mark, in those days, you didn't even have to give a real name to get on an airplane.
No, I understand. I understand, but I'm just saying. Imagine if for whatever reason they'd stopped you at customs and you're a young girl carrying $70,000. I mean, that's the type of danger they were putting you in. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I was 17 years old.
A teenager carrying that amount of money. That's crazy.
And the most I ever carried was $40,000 in cash in my jacket. But again, that's what tipped the IRS's interest in my involvement, because then I could testify to the vast amounts of money that were coming from all of the organizations around the world to Flag and to other areas, the Swiss bank accounts, etc. I didn't know the bank account numbers, of course, not a clue. And again, that's where we're insulated from knowing too much. All of us were.
Right.
So nobody knew that I was doing that. Nobody knew that Janis was bringing that kind of bucks to the ship. It's like, woo.
Right.
So again, insulated from the real happenings of the organization. And okay, so I was asked by the IRS to come and testify. So we went, testified. This was in the early 70s. And this is when the Church of Scientology was not allowed to be not for profit at the time. After that, the case was appealed, and I believe they won on appeal. Janis, would you be able to comment?
Are you talking about they didn't have tax exemption at the time, is what you're saying?
No, but they were. You're right. They didn't have tax exemption, and they were applying for it. And that's where the information that some of us
they didn't eventually get tax exemption until 1992.
Right, when DM got it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But they were fighting it, and you know, when we were around, you know, L. Ron Hubbard was in hiding because the IRS was, their criminal investigation division was investigating him, saying that the money from Scientology was they called it annulment, was going to Hubbard. You know what I mean? So
Right.
anyway, that
Well,
was unresolved for years. Yeah.
yeah, well, even when we were going to sail into the U.S. and we ended up having to turn around in U.S. waters and get back into international waters because the IRS was on the dock waiting to come aboard and arrest Hubbard for tax evasion.
You wrote about that in book 2.
Yeah.
Yes, very good.
Okay, so you went and testified in front of the IRS about transferring money and stuff. So this was in the early 70s. So that would have been before the Apollo trying to come into the United States.
Just at the same time.
Well, there you go. I mean, so they're like going, okay, well, there's cash. There's probably cash on. They probably wanted to look on the ship and see what all was in there. You know.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, the Knox were also on the dock, so we always thought they were probably going to try and, you know, drop some drugs on the ship and claim they found us smuggling drugs into the country.
Yeah, and that is something I have to say and reiterate that there were no drugs on the ship or in the Church of Scientology. There was no slave labor or exploitation of, you know, young ladies or men or whatever. It wasn't part of the operations ever that I was.
Well, it depends on how you define it now, because nowadays they would go like, well, yeah, they had teenage girls working, you know, long hours and children underage. So yeah, no, I mean, you could say that time period, it wasn't frowned upon, but it would be frowned upon today. You know, a lot of the things that were done.
Well, and I believe slavery, you're not paid, and there were times your pay gets docked.
Yeah.
You know, I would say I was a child slave, but you're right about the drugs. There was no drugs.
No.
None.
No. And I got docked pay for a year because when I was external transport, I was taking people to the airport, and I had my briefcase between my knees and an envelope of cash sitting on the front, ready to hand to the people for their travels back. And a whole horde of people came around us, grabbed the briefcase and the money and took off. And we tried to chase them. We're yelling for the police to help us, blah, blah. So I ended up losing $600 of company money. And Hubbard ordered that I not be paid for 2.5 years.
So you were a slave.
Basically, yeah. I guess you could call it that. So
let's get back to when you testified for the IRS. Did you go to Washington, or where was it at? Or how did it
Los
happen?
Angeles.
You went to LA, and then were you sworn in to testify, or was it just an interview, or what? Yeah.
I was 24 at the time, I believe.
And you basically were just telling the stories about what you observed and what you were involved in when you were on the Apollo.
Yes,
right?
And the amount of money that I personally carried, but also the information that was contained in various other reports from all around the world, where they again found all of those documents as a result of the raid latterly, but showing that there were millions and millions of dollars being generated for the Church of Scientology, and much of which was going to Hubbard.
Right.
Hubbard,
right.
again,
Hubbard. And that's what they were investigating. That's why they lost their tax exemption in the 60s or whenever it was. Yeah. And it took till 1992 till they got it back after Hubbard died, And they were correct, because a lot of the money was going to Hubbard. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Scientology did what they could to try and cover that up. Now, we as staff members wouldn't have known that, but that's what was going on. Once you get up to the higher levels, you start seeing where the money's going and what's happening. And of course, you justify it in your mind, like you said, because you're so brainwashed thinking we're here to save the world, and L. Ron Hubbard's a great man,
When I did that, I believed that. Now, I think, holy crap, I was an idiot. But, that's hindsight.
when I was there, I always believed, and Hubbard always said, 10% of all the book income was going to him. And a lot of the money was actually going to sealed reserves or reserves that the Guardian's office was overseeing. And the reserves were always just building, building, building. And the orgs were like poor as hell and couldn't even pay the staff while all this money is being taken and just sitting in reserves.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, again, in LA, we were followed. Again, that was all part of the record after the fact when they did this seizing of the documents. And, we had confrontations directly with people saying, screaming at us and outside of the courtroom. And anyway, I shrugged now, but it was pretty scary at the time.
Y'all bet.
Yeah.
Y'all bet. Hey, listen, we're gonna wrap up here because we got a lot more to cover on Clearwater and stuff like that. John, we can have you on for 2 or 3 or 4 more episodes. But let me ask you this: at that time period when you first left the ship, what were you doing work-wise? What you left Scientology, you left the ship. What did you start doing?
Well, for the first 9 months, I basically couldn't do anything. I was like, brain-wise, I couldn't function, and then initially
you're in your early 20s, right? Your early 20s then?
Yeah. And so I ended up, because I loved animals, I ended up getting a job on a local farm working with horses.
Oh wow.
Oh.
Yeah. And
you would fit right in with Janis's sister Terry.
Yeah. So again, that helped me reestablish my connection with the real world.
Right.
And then, well, it's a long story. I ended up in politics here in this community, and one thing I will say, the communication course did help me in my political life. I'll tell you, it did. So it's not 100% bad in that. Kick my bucket there.
That's okay.
It's not 1,000% bad. It's just 999% bad.
Right. I've had a lot of people comment that the communications course changed their lives.
Yes.
They learned how to communicate. They learned how to get a job interview, and it just helped them in general.
Just deal with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we were being brainwashed with the TRs, training drills, so that anybody that screamed at us, we could handle that. And that's
yes, we could.
But also we learned how to get a question answered, how to acknowledge somebody when they speak to you. These are common sense things, but a lot of you know as well as everybody else here knows that there's lots of people you talk to and you say something to them and they don't even respond back, or they don't acknowledge the fact that you said something to them, and it's you go, I need to say that again, you know what I mean? It's like it's just everyday life, and a lot of it's common sense anyway.
Yes, I agree. So we have to wrap it up, obviously.
No, we'll wrap it up. I mean, this is great. I'm learning something new every day from you, John. This is great history, great stories, and we're going to talk more about your mother and all the different things that she did. But this is quite interesting. I hope our viewers are finding it interesting as well. And I just wanted to say, if please subscribe to our channel, hit that subscribe and like button. We really appreciate it. It helps us get these stories out. And so if you're watching and you've enjoyed this interview with John, there's a part 1, of course, you can watch if you haven't already, but then there's lots of other videos and interviews on our channel. So please subscribe to our channel. And then also I wanted to mention, if you have any questions or you want to comment on anything John or we have said, you can go in the comment section and ask questions and comments. And I know we were reading them. The first interview got a lot of great comments about John, and also some questions, and also some people who knew John made comments and stuff. So anyway, so if you're interested in that, please ask questions and comments. And then finally, if you want to support our channel, you can make a donation just by buying us a coffee. There's a link down below in the description of the video. Just click on that link, follow the instructions, and you can make a donation to our channel. And any money that we get from this, it just really goes back into the channel, because we're just trying to get the word out and the message out. So we wanted to mention that there. Finally, if you're interested in Janis's book, you can get an autographed copy. This is book 1, Janis. That's with her with L. Ron Hubbard. And then this is book 2. That's her again with L. Ron Hubbard, and they're fantastic books, as John has mentioned. Anyway, you can order. Just click down below. There's a link to our shop, and you can order these. You can get them autographed. In the United States, we can send these out. If you're in the non-U.S., it's much more expensive to do so. But if you're in the United States, we can send you autographed copies. But also, Janis, the audiobook is available too, right?
Yes, it can be gotten on Amazon.com.
For book 1. Book 1 audio.
Yes,
is
for
on
book 1, yes.
Amazon.com.
Yeah.
All righty.
John, I must say, time flies when you're having fun. I have enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too.
An hour.
Me too. And a tiger doesn't change its stripes. Scientology still does the same abusive things that they said that they stopped doing years ago. They still do them. They just do them in different forms, but they're doing the same thing.
Yeah, you're right. Peel the onion, guys. You do a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, everybody. Until the next time, we'll see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.